Hello and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got two marvelous co-hosts with me today. First, Matt Rossi. How you doing today, Matt? Go.
I'm locked in eternal war with my computer, but I'm trying.
Yeah. I mean, there's a metaphor in there about technology and being eternally at war with it. Joining us as well is our latest addition to the Lore Watch crew, Eric O'Day. How you doing, Eric?
Joe, there's no lore in lumber. Now that the new achievements are live for getting, you can harvest lumber while you're mounted if you harvest a lot of it, but it's a lot, and I'm working on them, but it's thousands, and you don't learn anything about the game or Azeroth while you're chopping wood. You just chop wood.
I have
learned. You do learn is that the trees don't scream obscenities at you when you cut them down, which, considering how many living, walking trees there are in Azeroth, is kind of surprising.
I will say the other thing that I have learned from it is how many axes are just left in trees around Azeroth.
How many times have we, the player base as large, chopped down all of the trees on Azeroth? Probably many times over at this point.
What's ironic is that the trees of Azeroth grow back in lightning speed, like within days, seconds, really.
Wait, so are trees like Azeroth's like hair? Are we like trimming Azeroth's eyebrows while we do this, and they're just growing back in record speed?
No, I don't think so.
But I don't think that's a question.
Salon.
Maybe, but I don't think that's one of the questions on today's list. But we are going to be answering more of your questions, our wonderful listeners. I do want to thank you for sending those in and remind you that we want more of them. So continue to send those in. And you can send questions in to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. We ask that you specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you are a Patreon subscriber or if you don't really like email, we have two channels set aside on Discord where you can also submit them. For everybody, we have the Q and Podcast Questions channel. Same rules apply, sending us an email. If you are a Patreon subscriber, we have the Patron Q and Podcast Questions channel where we tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. Our first one comes from Felinae. Xal'atath is currently camping out in the shell of an elf body. Do we know who that vessel was before Zal climbed inside? Was she a good person, a bad person, a perfectly normal person who was a mix of both depending on the day or situation? We actually know very little about them outside of the questing, but we do know who they were. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, they were in the quest. No, I'm just saying they were in the quest. I didn't do that quest because I didn't want to have a tentacles hat forever, like the rest of you mad people who thought, oh, they'll just get it taken off. You can't just take an old god head off your face, man. So I didn't do that quest, but I know it was one of the blood elves who is distantly related and trying to
not a blood elf
power. And okay, high elf. Whatever.
Yeah, it was a high elf. So Inanus, Inanis,
I think.
Yeah, Inanis, Inanis. I hate words like is a high elf.
Banana, just don't pronounce it.
Yeah, there you go. Is a high elf from Falcon's Rest and Drustvar, who was part of this group called the Deep Watchers. The Deep Watchers were in possession of the Void Stone, which was this void artifact that essentially was like suffused with all of this power. Matt, I think at one point had posited that it may have been similar to like a void-infused Adelie crystal. I think way back when.
That argument.
Yeah, and I think there's an argument that
we've
potentially
actually seen those before, so yeah.
And with how much power was stored in this, I think there's a pretty good case for that still. But the quest is that while we're basically palling around with Xal'atath, because that's a good idea apparently, when she's in her knife wife form, we come across these group that are trying to harness the power of the Void Stone. We then kill this person with the urging of Xal'atath, because again, this makes perfect sense. And then Xal'atath then coaxes us into unleashing the Void Stone's power, which then gives her the strength she needs to escape the blade and get inside of this body, corrupting it in the process and turning it from a high elf into essentially what is it is a void elf, but like a void elf plus, almost like a new game plus. The weird thing about it is as you complete this quest, it feels like this character, an ace, which I'm just going to go with that, accepts that she's becoming a vessel for Xal'atath and believes that is truly her purpose. So we can surmise a couple things from this, one of which is that she's kind of out of her mind cultist. 2, that this cult was probably formed by Xal'atath at some point, or somebody who was once in possession of Xal'atath. And 3, this was part of a long con by Xal'atath to try to find a new shell to get inside of. These are the things that I get from it. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Eric, or if you did that question, you have any feelings about it. But
I had never done the quest until this week when I did it as part of my research, and I didn't know that I was going to get a tentacle eye thing on my head. So I had to. Yeah, that was fun to look up how to get rid of that. I didn't notice for like a day, and I was like, "What's on my head?"
You didn't actually get rid of it. It's
No.
in you now forever. Xal'atath will even comment on it. Actually, you know who else comments on it? Our old buddy N'Zoth. When you go back in time, if you had that thing on you at any point, he makes comments about it.
Also, if you do the why can I not remember the underground cavern with the Arathi Hollowfall? If you want to Hollowfall and you do the Voidfish quest, it also comments on it as well.
I will say that Inanus, or whatever how we're pronouncing it, it means void in Latin. And so that tells me that maybe that's a taken name, and that she maybe wasn't always Inanus and maybe had a different name. I don't think that it's another character that we'll find out, oh, she used to be this, but maybe that's not her name that she's had for 10,000 years, or maybe it is. And Xal'atath is kind of watching them with the Void Stone, and she kind of makes like a look at these fools. They don't know what they're doing. Let's take this from them. So they seem like almost inept, maybe. And then I don't know. My thought was like you have to kill the cultists and this high elf, and then Zal decides that one. But like she easily could have decided to take any of them. So she could have taken the bearded humans form. We could be chasing a Snidely Whiplash looking guy across Azeroth for the last 2 expansions.
I mean, there's also the thing, we should probably point out the new cinematic a little bit. Not that it has anything to do with the elf body, but it does sort of relate to Xal'atath and the possible tendency of her to steal bodies. Because in that cinematic, you guys know about the cinematic, I'm sure, listening at home, but it was a pretty recent one they put out, basically featuring Xal'atath. I don't know how to put this. Like, it's about, basically you see a small figure, like a small semi-humanoid, looks like a child, and at one point it gets sucked up into like a void torrent, and then seems to kind of become Xal'atath, and that we don't know what that means. We don't know if it's actuality or not, because it's Xal'atath. I mean, you can't really believe things that you're told about Xal'atath, but it is worth noting that she might very well have been mortal once and might have been searching for a mortal body this whole time. We don't know the answer to that question, but it is a question we do have to ask in the wake of that cinematic.
Yeah, there's a lot that sort of there's a lot of up in the air with Xal'atath and where they were beforehand, because we have glimpses, we have bits and pieces of it. We don't have the whole truth, and that's by design for multiple reasons. We know that the being, or the at least the sentience that is Xal'atath, is ancient. That definitely either doesn't like the old gods at all, views them as parasites, or divergence, I guess would be the best way to put it. It has been along for a while, but we don't know that if Xal'atath was something that was consumed by the void at some point and made into a harbinger. We don't know if that Xal'atath is the end result of a body or a people that had been previously consumed by why can't I think of his name now? From Manaforge.
Dementius?
Yeah, Dementius, because she definitely does not like Dementius. And it seemed like she might have been a herald for him at some point, or a harbinger in name like that as well. She seems to know an awful lot about the void. But yeah, it's interesting because she claims that she was a mortal child that was in a world consumed by the void. We don't know if that's actually true. We see a scene of it with her wearing a pendant very similar to the Dark Heart, but whether that's true or not, I don't know. It also might be one of those
I
things where it's
also-
true from a certain perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I do also want to point out, since Eric went and got all Latin on us, the word in Latin, nanas, which has an accent, it also means foolish or empty-headed. It's one of those words that's got a lot of meanings. It's the root for the modern word inane. Like when you call something inane,
Yeah.
you're basically saying it's pointless or stupid or empty. That's something to keep in mind with the character Ananas, that it might have been a name she gave herself to indicate the void, but it also might be kind of a hint that she was misled or duped. And
Her title is Chronicler of Whispers. That was the other
Yeah.
thing in my notes that I thought was interesting.
And as a result of that, it's something to think about. Xal'atath is almost always misleading people. She doesn't lie very often.
No, omission, maybe.
Yeah, omission, I'll give her lies of omission. I'll give her saying enough truth to hang you, but not enough to actually provide the real nuance. You see that all through the whole deal with you working with her and I can never remember the name of Illyria's buddy there. The void ethereal dude.
Locust Walker.
Locust Walker. Locust Walker is made to look like a liar continuously through that entire quest line because he was lying. But it's not exactly surprising that Xal'atath is revealing all of this at the worst possible moment to make Illyria question Locust Walker. Sorry, I keep wanting to call him Nexus Walker because it's Nexus Prince or Locust Walker. I want to jam them together into one guy, and that doesn't make any sense. But regardless, it's not a surprise that everything Xal'atath is doing to quote unquote lead Illyria forward to her point of view also manages to slag off everybody else who has been like giving a different perspective than Xal'atath's.
Or all the people that are trying to ground Illyria too, right?
Yeah.
Like it's every like I think we can go back to the novel and we can really see that because that's where the cracks are really shown. And I'm curious for the motivation behind it, right? Is she somebody posited that the vessel that Xal'atath is in currently is degrading and that she's looking for a new host body. And Illyria's already proven that she can withstand the void and is a strong vessel. Another person I saw, because I spent a lot of time this weekend going through the weird and spindly Reddit of Warcraft lore. That is a weird place. If y'all post in there, I see you. You ask some weird questions. But posited that potentially she's rebuilding her own sort of like allegiance, her own people that will see her point of view, that are strong enough to resist the void, to literally fight back the void, because the void is what consumed her and turned her into what she is, stole her life, stole everything from her, made her a herald for Dementius, and sort of set her on this path of servitude. And everything we're seeing as a result of it is literally the tantrum of a child who doesn't want to be governed anymore, and instead trying to find all the friends at the playground that they can and convince them that they should be throwing rocks with her. And there may be an element of truth there. Just because you've lived for millennia doesn't mean that you've grown up. It doesn't mean that you have all the pieces, right? Go ahead.
Another way to look at it is like, you ever like meet people who, when they were younger, everyone was always telling them how like emotionally mature they were and how they had an old soul.
I hated that.
And
yeah, but yes.
It's a really fun way for them to admit that they've traumatized you without actually having to admit that they've traumatized you. Xal'atath does have a lot of the personality traits of someone who has internalized trauma and decided that's how the world works. And I do like that idea that Xal'atath is essentially just the equivalent of someone who was in the gifted program for void people and is now burned out and just wants to tear it all down so she can build a better thing that is just going to be that thing again. Because she doesn't actually know how to build anything. That is, every time she's built alliances, it's always been through carefully balancing everybody against each other so she can pull the plug at a moment's notice, as we learned throughout our experiences in Koresh. She's always putting a self-destruct button in. It's all she really knows how to do. Like, think about the beginning of the War Within, where basically she's already done with the Nerubians and wants us to destroy them.
Yeah, there's also
That's
an
her
interesting
disposal option.
there's an interesting parallel to that too, and I want to get Eric's point of view on this afterwards. But this is something we know about already. So this is a minor spoiler if you've been avoiding everything from Midnight so far. So come back in like a minute or two. But it's in the early stages of Midnight, in the trailers and everything else. When the assault on the Sunwell is happening, it's not just void entities she's summoning, it's devourers as well. Like void corrupted devourers. So that sort of goes into what Matt's saying, which is the only thing she knows how to do is throw that self-destruct button. Because devourers, that's all they do is consume like material from the prime material plane or anything for energy. They eat. We've seen that they eat. We see that they eat anima. Like, so seeing that they consume void and can subsequently essentially be controlled or influenced by the Dark Heart or Xal'atath, they're destructive forces. They are not, these like cuddly little things. And she's going right for them. She's going for these destructive forces that are easy to manipulate. And like Ilaria is sort of the odd one out in that, right? Ilaria is maybe a little easier to manipulate, but she's not mindless. And so like, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. And I know we've come a long way from where, like, talking about Inane's body, but it seems like it is a specific choice, right? Especially if Ilaria is her end goal. Ilaria has a very strong emotional tie to elves, high elves in particular. And when you start then in a high elf body that is very similar to her, it makes it a little easy to sort of play on the emotions, at least in my opinion. Eric, what are your thoughts upon this long, random tangent rant we've been on?
Listening to you guys talk, the two things that came to mind were that one, the new cinematic is Xal'atath convincing Saladar to, bend the knee and become allegiant to her. And so, again, we don't think she lies, but it is her version of the truth. Mm-hmm. If it is, here's what happened to me, I'll tell you what happened when I was a young person on, if that is some other planet, her home planet, and she was some sort of mortal. She does say when she takes Inane's body, I haven't taken a mortal form in so long. So we've known that she took a mortal form at least, but now we know it might be her own original mortal form. And the other thing that really is kind of striking me is that she's sort of, we know that we talked about her as an entity of the void for a long time. And we didn't know if that meant that she was an old god from another planet or a void lord or some in between, some other creation. But knowing that she is, a creature of the void, she sort of has been using the void as a tool and not necessarily to make everything else void the way that the old gods and the void lords seem to be. They want to create, void titans and blanket the universe in void and all that. It really seems like whatever her goal is, which we talked about last week, whatever it is, the void is just the thing that she has found that she can wield, that she's going to use to get whatever it is she wants. And it kind of almost reminds me of, going back a couple more weeks and talking about the novel, of Turalyon, who is seeing the light more as a tool, as something to be wielded, as less of a, religion than, sorry, not Turalyon. I'm talking about,
Arathor?
I'm
talking about Arathor. Turalyon is the one that seems it more like a religion. Arathor is the one who seems it more like a tool, has a different relationship to it. So it's interesting that we're getting more Arathor in this next chapter as well. And it'll be interesting to see the relationship as it goes between Arathor and Illyria and Xal'atath and how that all plays out, because we know it's going to be a main part of Midnight.
Yeah, there's the other interesting thing about all that too is the worst outcome or the worst revelation out of all of this is that Xal'atath is telling 100% the truth, right? Like everything she's told King Salad Bar is 100% accurate, and because
please watch the sneeze guard, friends.
Yeah. But it is, that's the worst possible outcome, right? Because then like you start to understand she becomes a sympathetic villain almost. And I'm not saying that because I want to like her, but it makes her more complex and gives her more than one note, and it elevates her maybe potentially a little bit from that tantruming child. Um, maybe this is coming from a place of hurt. Maybe she just needs a hug. Who knows? But the other interesting thing, though, too, is we know that she has Locust Walk, and Locust Walker is not very likely to bend the knee. Locust Walker is pretty staunchly opposed to the Void, despite embracing it as a power to be used against itself. So it'll be interesting to see how that works, because I go back to that whole relationship with Ilaria and Locust Walker and their conversations and the influence they both had on each other as they like sort of grew. Like Locust Walker, I think in the past wouldn't have like really cared or had such an emotional attachment to like Ilaria as a student, but Ilaria sort of like won him over and sort of like brought a little bit of, for lack of a better term here, because I don't want to say, I don't know what else to call it, but humanity to his worldview, to how he views things. And Locust Walker added an element of sort of detachment almost to Ilaria that she necessarily didn't have before. Maybe like a little seeds of it from when she was like briefly Ranger General, and the stuff that happened with the war and being independent and not wanting to lose people because of, feeling getting hurt. But it wasn't as pronounced as before. So they both kind of altered each other. And I'm wondering how that would potentially affect Xal'atath now that essentially Locust Walker's on tap, right? We don't know how being in the Dark Heart, how that communication works or how that goes back and forth. I know that Khadgar sort of talked about it a little bit as being like this sort of, I want to say, weirdly like blank space for him. But maybe that's because Xal'atath didn't really need anything from him aside from using him as an arcane battery, right? So I'm really curious to see how that sort of evolves and what comes up. We're not going to have to wait long, right? Like it's sort of like the central story arc for what happens at the opening salvo of the expansion, which, is only a few weeks from the time of this recording, which is wild to me, all things considered. But yeah, so I don't know that answered your question. Maybe it did. Hopefully you just enjoyed the ride. Think we'll move on to the next one, which comes from Azure Loon. Is Azeroth a troll? What I mean is that Titans have avatars. So if Azeroth is born, will her avatar be some variant of troll given how old the race is and how often they have been shaped by Azeroth into other races? One of those random shower thoughts I had right after we need to buy shampoo. I understand. Trust me, shower thoughts around lore in these games is wild sometimes. I have my opinions, but I'll kick it over to you guys first. So whoever wants to go ahead, what do you think? Is Azeroth a troll?
I would say no, and that's my answer that I had to think really hard about and do a lot of research on. But I like where it's coming from because there are not that many entities original to Azeroth. There are a lot of we have a lot of aliens on Azeroth that we can play as and interact with. We have a lot of entities on Azeroth where we know that they came from something. They were created by something. Humans and dwarves, they were created by the Titans, and then a couple iterations later they became humans and what we see now. Trolls are one of the races that seem to just have been on Azeroth since the beginning, without being created by some entity that flew over from space because they thought Azeroth was interesting, without being created by a wild god in their image, like so many of the races. I mean, you talk about like Gorloks and Tuskar and Harpies and Quillbore seem to have origins in, a wild god created by, desired to create a whole race in their image. So could troll be like what Azeroth would be like in its primal form if it took an avatar? I also went back to Antorus and I went to battle Argus again because we know that the Titans claim that world souls are baby Titan eggs that hatch into Titans, and so therefore all world souls would be Titans and take a Titan avatar that looks vaguely kind of like a cross between a human and a Vicryl, maybe. But when Argus takes its form, it's been, corrupted by death magic, and it still looks like the rest of the Titans. It doesn't look like anything different. It's a whole nother planet. It has not been ordered. Like, if the Titans are going around and ordering otherwise primal world souls that are untouched, and then once they're ordered and they hatch into Titans, they look like Titans. If that was the case, then Argus would have looked like something else. So maybe world souls, when they have an avatar, uh, would be just that, and they all look the same. I'd be really interested to see if it was trolls, but also the trolls didn't start out as trolls. The trolls were some other primitive race, and the ones living near the Well of Eternity kind of gained sentience and intelligence. So you have to go like maybe even further back, and maybe trolls and goblins possibly because goblins have to be in the conversation too, right? Goblins are also a race that originated on Azeroth, and we don't really know where.
Well, it's almost like that's very similar. It's almost like that's very similar to the divergent path that like trogs and dwarves and gnomes, right?
Yeah, exactly. So goblins and maybe an earlier precursor more like a pygmy. So I don't know. Maybe Azeroth will be a pygmy.
Matt?
I don't know that I agree with something he just said.
That's what we're here for.
I don't know that we know that trolls were exposed to the Well of Eternity.
We're told
At least not directly. Well, there's the thing. Who told us that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
But more importantly, we know that like each world soul exists in a world. We know that Azeroth has a world soul in it, and we know that that world soul was extraordinary enough that when the Titans found out it had old god infestation, instead of just killing it and wiping, okay, we don't need this world, they were like, we got to fix this. We know that Azeroth has connections to at least one and possibly all potential Xerath. We know that there's a connection to Xerath Mortis. We know there could be connections to Xerath Ortis, because that's mentioned in a document we find at the beginning of Dragonflight. There could very well be multiple Xeraths for every plane of existence that touches upon Azeroth.
Yeah, there's probably like a Xerath Ignis and a Xerath whatever. Yeah.
Whatever the light one would be. And there might very well be connections on Azeroth to all of them. If that is the case, that would explain why its world soul was so important, and they needed to preserve it. Now there was a big wound in Azeroth for many, many, many years, and that wound led to what we call the Well of Eternity, which was that giant pool of seething magical power that was literally the blood of the planet, being funneled back to the world soul so it didn't die. And so it kept being, not only it kept its process of generating itself till it eventually would awaken. If you're exposed to that Well of Eternity juice, what happens?
Elfinization.
You get elf-like. Yeah, you get like a body more like one of the elves.
I mean, look at the Jinyu.
Specifically night elves. Yeah, Jinyu look like night elves with Murloc heads.
Mm-hmm.
The night elves who were night trolls, dark trolls, look like night elves. I mean, it's sort of... we even have something I've always thought was interesting, in that we have a base that was corrupted by an old god that used to be right off the side of the Well of Eternity before the Sundering. And in that place, namely on Courage, there are the Twin Emperors.
And what do they look like?
Look like night elves.
Yep.
Not like their heads are not, you don't
no,
look at that
they're an approximation or a corrupted version of it. Like,
but I feel like that form that things on Azeroth keep taking when they are exposed to the Well of Eternity or some other corruptive force, as in the case of the Twin Emps, they may have been directly created. We don't know how we got the Twin Emps. They might have been fully corrupted from some Titan. We have no idea. There are, just over like one place into Uldum, there's the pillars, I want to say Pillar of Creation, but that's not what it is. It's the Halls of Origination are right there.
Mm-hmm.
They can just reformat the planet, and it's full of these walking Titan servants, very similar to the Watchers up north. Like, for instance, Satesh. They're all right there, and we know that at least one of them, Osiria and the Unscarred, used to be different Then he got nearly destroyed after he'd been corrupted, and the old gods rebuilt him into his current form, which is like a giant bird thing that walks around and on a body like a night elf. I think it's quite possible that anything Azeroth would choose as an avatar would look like a night elf, because it would be empowered by Azeroth's world soul, which seems to like it when things look like night elf. That doesn't mean that it couldn't be a troll, because at least some trolls, like the Zandalar, are also fairly tall and statuesque, and other than the fact that they have tusks and their feet are a little bit bigger, don't look all that dissimilar to night elf. And by the way, I want to go to up to a night elf someday and say that out loud, because I'm positive they would not like it.
Also, remember that night elves are canonically taller than high elves.
Oh yeah, but I meant
I'm just for the people at home. This is for the people at home.
Oh yeah,
as something to bear in mind.
Canonically speaking, night elves are the tallest of them. They're even taller than the Nightborn, who look very similar to them, but they're slightly shorter, like a little tiny bit shorter. Possibly because they're supposed to be all effete and drinking, literally drinking French wine and acting like French people. I don't know why that would make you shorter. The French were notoriously pretty freaking tall. Look up Charlemagne sometime. But whatever.
Yeah,
I do think it's just a funny thing that everything exposed to the Well of Eternity tends to turn into an elf body.
Yeah, but I think you kind of went the exact place I was going to go with it, and I want to add a couple things to the beginning of it, right? So one of the things that this posits is that trolls are natural to Azeroth. We don't know that. We don't know anything that is actually native to Azeroth. The only thing that we could even potentially maybe, and this is a very strong maybe, give any credit to are Loa and Wild Gods. But even then, and we have to go back to Shadowlands for this, you have to remember, whenever you're talking about any of this, all of this was part of the plan of the first ones. The birth of the universe, the seeding of planets, was all part of something they did. It's not spontaneous generation. And so what exists on this outer shell, this egg, as we've called it for many years, or at least I have, doesn't necessarily mean that that is the natural, true form of what Azeroth sees in her mind's eye. For all we know, it's a dwarf. Because, again, who were the speakers to Azeroth? Who were the ones that tap into her? It was the Diamond Earthen, the diamond ones that were doing it. Why did they have the connection? Is it because they were made of diamond? Was it because they resonate? Or is it because Azeroth imprinted on them? Is there a reason why it started with that, and then as they moved to the surface, things got taller and leaner? Probably. There's probably a point of evolution there. But to Matt's point...
God. Discs of Norgannon. Dude, the Discs of Norgannon.
Yeah, go ahead.
The actual ones in Alderaan. They talk about the different versions.
Yep.
They talk about the ones that are more mineral-oriented, who will serve as carvers and defenders, and then they talk about the ones that will actually turn into the organic life of the planet.
Yep.
So, yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
That all of this is potentially also an evolutionary programming plan, not necessarily by the Titans, but by the Titans and the directive that they were implanted with. It potentially. I've talked about this a lot too, right? Where the Titans, for all of their power, to me, now that Shadowlands has existed, are nothing more than essentially prime material versions of the Pantheon of Death. For all we know, they are mantles of power more than anything else, right? And so the form that they take, the things that they do can be anything. All we know is that life that was created at least seems to be, in part, a plan of the first ones. And what the Titans were doing, they may not even realize what they were doing when they set this all in motion. When they programmed the Keepers to do this, when they programmed these Titan-forged races to do what they were going to do. Because everything comes into this humanoid form. The Tol'vir become obsidian destroyers and potentially, and become cat people, but nothing says that they didn't evolve into human-like things. Why were there, like Matt pointed out, with like a siren or any of those other, Watcher-esque things that walked upright? Mogu, the statues that are in the form of the Mogu, the Watchers, those things, they're not weirdly like cloven hooved or having those like animal like back paws. No,
Well, look at Norishan.
Norishan stands upright like a humanoid, like the Twin
And he's the
Emperors.
Titan Watcher who's the closest to the Mo.
Very much so. I mean, this all seems like this was potentially part of the evolutionary plan where everything starts in a very specific form, but then moves its way up their chains into, and I wasn't joking when I said elfinization. There's this, we talked about this before, what is it? Carcinization, which is,
Yeah, when crabs, basically anything that's underwater long enough, ends up evolving towards a crab-like shape, even if it's not related to the animals we call the true crabs. And what's weird is that doesn't just happen with animals.
no.
If you know what a tree is, you know that trees are not necessarily related.
Mm-hmm.
Like, tree is just what happens when plants decide, I want to get really big so I can get as much sunlight as possible. They grow a big woody stalk, big root system, and go up in the sky so they can get more sun and get above everybody else who's trying to do the same thing. And this has happened many, many times, and none of these trees are related. A mangrove tree is not even closely related to an apple tree. They're both plants, but that's basically it. And it's so fundamental that some forms of fungus have done it, which isn't even the same kingdom. It's completely different. But even fungus are like, I also want to get a giant stalk and get really tall. I don't want to do that to absorb sunlight. I want to do that to block sunlight, so more stuff down there is infectable by fungus.
So that's convergent evolution. That's evolution giving, there's an advantage to having things done a certain way. And so that happens, that there's a way that's best to fly. So birds evolve to fly, and bats evolve to fly, and insects evolve to fly. They all have wings, but it's not that they were trying. There was nothing shaping that other than the natural selection of progressive generations getting a little bit better at gliding until they could fly. So
when you have a design system like Azeroth, as I think Joe is going towards, and I'm going to shut up and let him talk.
No, go ahead. Go right ahead. Bring.
I just think that when you have a design system, it has prerequisites programmed to what is the best thing to do in this situation. Are you going to be living underground and shaping the earth? Then you should be blocky and full of rock, so nothing can hurt you down there.
And short, so your tunnels don't have to be as large as you would necessarily need to move properly.
Yeah, squat. Even if you're giant, go look at the giants sometime.
Oh yeah, they're squat.
The ones that are native to Azeroth, they're squat. Some of them look a lot like big freaking dwarves.
Hold on. Real quick though, like going that same route, you can look at the Vrykrull and look how they evolved. What did they start evolving into? Humans.
They started getting, they got human. What is human if not intermediary between dwarf and elf?
And we know that exactly exists because of the Arathi, who have basically humans who have bred with elves. All of this is compatible. All of this is genetically compatible. There is a reason for this. Sorry, please continue.
What's even funnier to think about is that if we look at another world that has a similar system, although different, go to Draenor and look at its evolutionary history.
Yes.
It started off with a Titan deciding we need a mountain that is so freaking big and massive that it can crush all these incredibly out of control plants and rebalance
that also look
this
like
world's
elves.
ecology. Yeah, and the plants do look like elves, yes, because they're absorbing nothing but like spirit from the world, because there's no world soul in there to eat it themselves. But they made the giant, and the giant did its job pretty well. I think his name was Gron. And he got smashed by the plants, because the plants reached up and smash him into little pieces, because they were like, he's going to kill us, we got to stop him. But that didn't help them. It actually made things worse, because each bit of him was still dedicated to that whole process and kept doing it. Mm-hmm. And as they wore down and got smaller and made more of themselves, and those were smaller still, you ended up going almost exactly the opposite direction of what we just talked about. But it's almost so perfectly inverted that I think you have to really look at it. They got smaller, and you could say they even got squatter, but they also got smarter, which is very similar to how gnomes on Azeroth are among the most intelligent beings on the world. And they're tiny. tiny, 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 and they have this tiny little build that is almost exactly like if you starved a dwarf for 5 years. So it's skinny, but it's tiny, and they're real smart. And I've said this before, everyone who's watched the show knows I'm about to say this. Orcs are that process.
Mm-hmm.
Orcs are tiny little things compared to everything else on Draenor.
Everything
Orcs
native
are
to
the
Draenor.
Smartest, everything native to Draenor, although again, made by a Titan, so native in quotes.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole process of life on worlds seems to be rooted around sometimes the planets develop some kind of natural life, like say elementals, but eventually Titans come along and in their reordering change everything into something that will reproduce itself in a more efficient way. And it almost always ends up with at least 2 or 3 different body plans that it really likes. You've got ogres on Draenor. Ogres are the bulky, built like a dwarf, but not as small as orcs, who are slenderer. And that's really funny to call them slender, but compared to like ogres, yeah, they're slender and more intelligent. And that's very much dwarves and gnomes. Meanwhile, you've got the native spirit energy of the planet making things elfy.
Or larger.
Because
Like look at Drogbar.
Yeah. All of this stuff going back and forth. It seems like there's the difference, but it's the symbiosis between the titanic programming on how to create organic beings and the world soul itself, how it interacts with that programming to make elfinization. It's like the convergent force of evolution is the spirit world itself. It's the anima coming through the world, because anima transcends Titan. It transcends this reality. It is part of not just this reality, but every reality contacting. The Shadowlands wouldn't exist without anima. The Emerald Dream wouldn't exist without anima. None of it would. Nothing in existence would exist without anima. And so you kind of see the processes interacting, and that's where convergence in this system that is created by ultimately the first ones, how it works and how it can be disrupted.
I think I got to throw out one more entity that we haven't talked about.
We're never going to talk about any other questions this week.
I think people at home are fine with that. Go ahead.
The one we haven't talked about is dragons. Are they native to Azeroth? Could Azeroth be a dragon?
We don't think they are.
A lot.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. We don't think they are. We think that they're elemental in nature because the elemental affinities that they have.
Elemental, then escaped to our plane, and then...
Well, here's the thing.
Not necessarily escaped. They may have been seeded.
Yeah. Well, the proto-drakes, we've already seen that they're extremely elementally based. Even more so than just dragons. And dragons themselves are elementally based. But the proto-drakes, we've seen that. We've also seen that proto-drakes are not the snarling imbeciles that the ones we saw in Northrend are.
I want to also just point out real quick that if we're going to talk about dragons and proto-drakes, we have to talk about Drakthir, because I don't think that's an accident that Neltharion made them like that.
Or made them elfier.
He made them elfier, right? Like he even their visage form.
Even turned into elves.
Yeah. So like I don't think that was an accident. I think that was by design. And I think that like Neltharion knew what, like, here's the thing. Yeah, he was driven crazy by the whisperings of the void inside of it and the deep places of the earth. But being put in charge of it, he had an understanding of that evolution that I don't think the others did. Right, like he was willing to go look and investigate that stuff a lot further than they would too, more so than the Lifebinder. He did,
and the Trogs are related to the ones that live in. I think you just said them. The Drogbar from High Mountain. Drogbar and Trogs seem to be related. There's no derivative. We don't have no definitive thing that says they are, but they seem related. And Drogbar, I mean, they follow that pattern. They're bulky because they're big, but they're squat. They are like squares. They are very similar to if you take a dwarf's body plan and just scale it up.
Yeah.
You know, and what do? They go around underground digging tunnels all the time. That's their favorite way to move around the world. And he enslaved them.
He did.
And used them as slaves for a very long time. I think he was studying that. And I think we get that by if you go to his lair, it very much
Avernus. You go to Avernus. Ooh. There's a
Avernus
lot.
is even worse.
Yeah. You go to Blackwing Lair, you go to Blackwing Descent.
You go to actually Neltharion's lair.
Yeah.
In Legion, you see more of it, more of the experimentation. You go to Avernus, and it's like a lab. It's like a mad scientist's summer home. It's kind of crazy. So yeah, I think dragons are really interesting in that we can't be absolutely sure, but we do know also with dragons that they're very sensible. They're very sensitive to the void, especially one of them.
They're very sensitive to energy.
Yeah, but specifically, what happened with one of them where he got himself some old god juice mixed in with his normal stuff?
Yeah, Galakrond.
When Galakrond was being changed by Tyr. How do we think Tyr was doing that?
Oh yeah, and don't forget, Tyr is air quote back now. There's going to be some really interesting conversations about his experimentations on dragons. Let's not mince words on that one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But the thing is that if we look at the other things that the Titans and Titanforged made and were made by, Tyr himself as a Titan Watcher is part of that process. He was created by and shaped by the Titans and their plan for existence. He's made out of metal, for Pete's sake. As you look at him and you think about what is it like when a proto-drake who is an elemental being is changed by a Titan Watcher into a dragon. Why is it that out of the various dragons, at least 2 of them, if not 3, because one of them we had Ysera and
all of them took elf adjacent forms except for Neltharion.
Yeah, Malygos had an elf adjacent form.
He's a half elf.
Dormu clearly has an elf adjacent form. Look at the guy.
He is a high elf. So is Alexstrasza. Ysera was a night elf. Neltharion was the only one that chose to take a human form.
And that would have been
evolution of Vrykul. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and that's interesting because Tyr made all of them, right? But
Tyr, who was in charge of experimenting on that stuff to begin with, who we know had archives full of this data that we literally go to a library and laboratory that Tyr was in, that we, for some reason, haven't gone back to look at the rest of the books and discs in there. Why? Anyway, sorry. I'm a little mad about that.
No, but I think one of the reasons we haven't gone back to look at them yet is because Tyr was like, you don't need to see that. Clonk. Lock.
I'm just
Thanks
waiting
for helping me, guys.
I'm waiting for Tyr to come back into the story because he's kind of like looking. We revive him and he kind of looks around and he looks at the humans around him and he's like, "Where are the Vrykul?" Because they hadn't turned into humans yet when he died.
No, they were already starting to, right?
They were starting to because he took some of the decay, the Vrykul who were changing down. He's not that he should be confused about the humans, but he should definitely be confused about the lack of Vrykul because when he left, there were still some Vrykul left.
Yeah. That I think, yes.
What's really funny about that is that all of human culture, and we are really on a tangent now, but I'm going to have to do this.
Let's
because
do
if
it.
you play a warrior, at one point you get the weapon that isn't Troll Kalar. You get the weapon that is this giant troll-killing sword, whose name I cannot remember at the moment. I deeply apologize. But when you get it, it's terrifying to trolls. Like they run away from it screaming because it's been used to destroy so many of them. But when he gets it, I can't remember his name now. When he built Thoradin, thank you. Thoradin built the various walls that helped highlight the beginnings of the Arathi civilization. I knew we'd be going back to the Arathi. When he got this sword, he was told that this was a single blade out of a set that their ancestors, and it was bigger than he was, but he still managed to use it as a two-handed weapon.
But it would have been a one-handed sword for a Vrykul.
Yeah, for a Vrykul. But he took it to the High Elves when they were making their deal. High Elves looked at it and go, "Oh, I know what those enchantments are," and they re-enchanted it for him.
Mm-hmm.
High Elf magic comes from the study of the Well of Eternity, because it's originally the Highborn who are spending all their time staring into the Well of Eternity to learn how to do magic better. They weren't just looking at it because it was pretty. They were looking at it because proximity to it helped you get better at magic. I want to now swing over to the goblins. How did they get smarter?
By exposure to Khajiit.
Yeah, powdered Khajiit put in their drinks. And when that happened, they became what they are now. But they had been changed by experimentation by a Titan forged named Mimir. Mimir didn't just make the gnome, he made the goblin. And then they got exposed to something that we know binds both void and, for lack of a better word, light. Khajiit can stabilize them so they can be used in weapons. And it comes from underneath the ground because it's dug up in mines. I really think we're going to find out at some point that Khajiit is like an isotope of both Azerite and like the Saronite, like void stuff. I think it's when you get Khajiit, it serves as a binding agent for either of them because it is both of them. And I want to again now swing back to what we're talking about, where the Well of Eternity versus the Titanic order plan. It's the same thing, just with different forces.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Khajiit could work on those forces too, because those forces are order and raw chaos.
But I also want to point out too, real quick, that we've seen goblins get bigger. Not in the hobgoblin form. Hobgoblin form
No, they've just gotten bigger. Straight up.
Like let's look at Gallywix. He's huge. There are others that are way larger than a normal goblin as well. Again, that elongation, that sort of, and what are they all exposed to? You're saying Khajiit, but also we know that Gallywix had Azerite for a very long time. We don't know how long he's had it. We don't know if he just kind of got bigger, got taller, because I guess the joke is that he's the fat cat like executive. I get that, but he's like 2 heads taller than the next largest goblin.
Yeah, but now think about this when you're talking about that. Other forces do this too. Fel can make you swell up.
Yeah.
It can make you taller. It can give you huge fangs. Void has all sorts of weird effects on things when they're exposed. Sometimes they grow tentacles. Sometimes they get bigger. There's a lot of these cosmic forces. We've only seen some of them, but we know. And Eric, I saw you lighting up a little bit ago, and I feel like we've talked a lot over you. So I want to now swing to you and say, what's your reaction to this babbling we're doing?
I mean, I think it all makes sense. What are goblins if not an elfinized version of something that looked less elfy than a goblin?
Yeah.
If Khajiit is doing the same thing as Well of Eternity and elongating the ears and making the head shape the same.
Aren't we? We're pretty much sure that pygmies in Azeroth are related to goblins, right? Like some pygmy-like ancestor.
We think so.
Them.
Without DNA tests,
obviously. But if you look at a goblin, like all the stuff you can look at and say high elves, night elves have this. Big ears, goblins have big ears. Bigger than a pygmy, goblins are absolutely bigger than a pygmy. And what's really weird about that is that it makes me then go and look at the fact that if you could take a Trog and use Titan forces to make a smaller, more socially adept Grummel.
Because that's what they did.
Grummels are just like the goblins, like the gnomes of Trogs. So it's the other direction.
Yeah, but even then, like you have to. That's like a purpose-built forced evolution.
Mm-hmm. But as you pointed out, do they know? Like, do they not have programming that they don't know they have?
And that's the thing. Like, I think that's part of the grand design of the first ones, right? Like bringing this all back to. And the reason that I refer to the universe in like terms of programming is, again, like there's been these little hints of it that the universe is supposed to be on rails, and Shadowlands did nothing to dissuade me from that point of view, especially when you look at the jailer. And to me, it reminded me a lot of, and not to throw in another thing in here, a lot of Tron, right? Where the program does what it's supposed to do until it realizes it's a program. And the jailer, Zoval, the original arbiter, realized that he was a program and then started learning what the purpose was of his programming and his air quote siblings and started railing against it. Right. So like the rest of them, and I'm going to say this with the Titans as well, We don't know what Sargeras knows at this point. We haven't sat and talked with him. We haven't had a conversation with him. We don't know if he understands the same thing that Zoval did, that we're just on this like supposed to be a predetermined path, that we're all operating on this sort of like primal programming. And that's what broke him. That the death of a world soul, that's what broke him. That's what like made him realize programming that he didn't realize that they were all doing beforehand. And again, coming back to Titans are order and all this other stuff, what is order but a set of instructions? That's really all it is. When you order stuff on your desk and you put them in specific places, you're imposing your will, your instructions on that chaos.
I gotta ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Because going along with this, what you just said, I want to flash back to a talking head of Joe popping up on the bottom of the screen, going, "What is order if not a series of instructions?" And then I turn to that image of Joe and go, "What is domination magic if not for a series of instructions that won't let you not execute it?"
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric. I saw you.
Yeah, I see Eric lighting up.
No, I'm my wheels are spinning too. I'm agreeing. I think that a lot of the big players that we've seen in the entire World of Warcraft are talking about this big picture program, this world is a prison, the order of everything, like kind of raging against this big picture. And so it seems like some of them think there's a problem with it. And maybe Xal'atath is either in on that or thinking of that too, like that the way things are isn't what is either supposed to be or what they think it's supposed to be.
And think about Algalon for a second, because Algalon is the best example of a Titanic servant who realized that the Titans might have been wrong.
Yeah.
It's like, you've triumphed against cosmically calculated odds. You shouldn't have been able to do this. And we did it again when we killed Argus. Argus wasn't supposed to be able to die.
It's like
not by our hands.
It's like going to delete a line of code from your program, and the program just says no, and it just undeletes itself. It's like, I made you. This isn't what's supposed to happen.
It's when you go and look at the notes someone left behind on the program when they started it, and the notes are like, okay, these are notes from the 15th revision of this. If you don't understand why this does this, neither do I. Like, why does killing Cthulhu shut down the auction house? I don't know. We've tried to fix this, but in the end, the system has been kludged to deal with all this weird stuff that they didn't see coming, and now they have no idea.
That's what I want to know about, like, Draenor. So Agrimar shows up, and there's plants everywhere, and he's like, this is no good. And so he creates Grond, and he's like, that ought to do it, and he leaves. And then Grond breaks over and over again until colossals and ogres and orcs. Would he come back and look at it and go, what happened here? Or would he go, yep, exactly as I expected? Yeah, exactly. Is it like, that's the programming of a Grond? Grond split up into ogrons and orcs. That's just what happens. It's just, I don't know. And I don't think we do either.
I set it up to do this thing. It has to do whatever it has to do that thing. If that means making lots of little ones, we've done it before. It's just how our process works.
Yeah. And we heard living outside the cycle, existing outside the cycle. Maybe the cycle is everything that's supposed to be on this program, and the things outside the cycle are trying to break it.
Yeah. There's a lot here, and this is a whole other set of rabbit holes that we can probably explore in a full episode dedicated entirely to it, which we very well may. But I'm going to have to get final thoughts here because I think we're running out of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll get your final thoughts on this. We'll go with Eric first.
Well, getting back to the question, if Azeroth does have an avatar after all this time, no matter what it is, it's going to be a little bit strange to have that possibly like walking around and talking to us and then go past the World Soul saga onto our next adventure, like with Azeroth or because Azeroth told us to. So I don't know. I'm just trying to picture it.
Matt?
I want it to have Kalimdor's Revenge.
Yeah.
It's a cool looking sword. I think it should get to have that. In a more serious note, I think it's they've said in the past before, when people who don't work there anymore used to work there, have said things that would indicate Azeroth was never going to actually wake up.
That's
because they
exactly
get to
where I
see
was
it.
going to go.
Yeah, and I think that might still be the case, in which case Azeroth will never wake up and will never actually, in a weird sort of way though, the thing I keep thinking about is this. What does a human look like to an amoeba? Like, we are made of all these cells that would look vaguely like an amoeba to an amoeba, but they're specialized and they're all over the place, and yet they do things together, like as if directed by one will. Imagine if Azeroth is that with everything that lives on it.
So
The planet will never actually have to get up into a Titan avatar because we are the body of its avatar. We are Azeroth.
that is exactly what I was going to say. And going back to the stuff with Algalon, going back with the stuff that we've seen time and time again, the stuff that we are not supposed to be able to do, I will posit once again, as I have said multiple times over the years, we are Azeroth's final form. We are what the first ones wanted to happen. An entity that can harness all of the primal forces of the universe, fed by a world that can harness all of the elemental forces of the universe and empowers us to defy fate, logic, and programming in a way that no other cosmic entity can. I often say that we are dumb adventurers. We are. We make mistakes. We do a bunch of really dumb stuff, but lately we've gotten better about that. We've sort of evolved and understood a little bit more about the planet we're on. I don't think Azeroth ever wakes up. I don't think Azeroth actually needs to have a final form, because I think Azeroth will continue to empower us into purpose-built, purpose-evolved forms to accomplish what needs to be done. And I don't think Azeroth will ever fully understand that that is what Azeroth is doing. So that's my final thoughts. I do want to end it there and thank everybody for joining us. Again, if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. You can also go ahead and send those questions on Discord. The Q and Podcast Questions channel is open for everybody. Same rules apply. If you are a Patreon subscriber, you can go ahead and hit us up in the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel. It's a place we look first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. And as always, a reminder that Blizzard Watch is made possible due to those generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Without you and your continued support, this site community and everything we do would not be able to thrive or grow. All those members do enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to our podcast, a better chance at having your question answered on our podcast for the queue. See the previous mention about that specific Discord channel, as well as an ads-free site experience. Again, if you can't support us on Patreon, your continued support in other ways do matter just as much as well. Share our content, like it on the platforms that you can like it on, as well as leave comments, engage with it. That does help as well for us to be able to feed the algorithm and make sure others know that we exist. But with that, friends, we will see you next week.